Good morning. I want to thank everybody for showing up today in the webinar. I'm going to go ahead and start real quick. My name is Gil-Rey Madrid, principal at Fort Stockton High School in Fort Stockton, Texas. Just real quick, a little bit of demographics. Here's where Fort Stockton is located in the Blue Star, out in West Texas, in between about halfway between El Paso and San Antonio. So if you've ever traveled through I-10, we have about 8,000 people. We have a lot of oil and gas, a lot of agriculture still. We have 2 prisons out here. Closest airport is in Midland, Odessa, and we're very close to the Texas-Mexico border. We do have a Walmart. That's how you kind of set yourself if you're a big city, I guess. But nevertheless, if you've driven through the city of Fort Stockton, there is a roadrunner called Paisano Pete that is about halfway through Fort Stockton on I-10. So, real quick about our school district, we have about 2,300 kids in our schools, 1 high school, 1 middle school, 1 intermediate, 4th and 5 campus, and then 2 elementary campuses, and then 1 disciplinary alternative education campus. Our demographics, we have about 600 kids in the high school and about 500 kids in the middle school, and largely Hispanic population, and largely at-risk students. And at risk in Texas is there's about 13 different traits that kids get if they're considered at risk, such as failing a grade or not doing well on a state assessment, being on probation, just what have you. Our mobility rate is about 10 to 15%. That just basically means kids who aren't in our district at least 6 weeks throughout the year because they've moved somewhere. And then if you look at the bottom down there, our economically disadvantaged students, we have between 66% at the middle school, 58% in the high school, and overall in our district we're at about 67% economically disadvantaged students. When I was at the middle school 3 years ago, we kept doing the same thing and not getting any results in our math department. We didn't make AYP. We were on the verge of being unacceptable. And we needed a program that would target individual needs of those students in math. The teachers were struggling with their students because we had all kinds of students at different levels in math, and so we didn't really have a instructional-based academic program for math. We had some for reading, but we didn't have anything for math, and we were getting further and further behind in math. One of the challenges that we faced were that we were kind of doing the same thing over and over. We had tutorials for kids that failed their class at 30 minutes a week, and if they failed again, they'd go again for another time and another time. And they were and teachers were getting frustrated, the kids were getting frustrated, and so we had to do something a little bit differently. And so we needed an academic program that would target those individual needs in math, because we kept doing the same thing and getting the same results. With that being said, what I noticed was that we had 3 years of math at the middle school, but we had different levels of math. We had some kids who were probably working at a 2nd, 3rd grade level, some kids working at a 5th grade level, and so we had to address a wide range of math gaps. And teachers, I wanted teachers to teach at grade level, because what was happening is that they needed to teach at grade level, because the students were going to be tested at grade level, regardless if they had a 4th or 5th grade math ability, being in the 6th or 7th grade. One of the things that we also needed to address was more of a systemic view of addressing the feeder school that fed into us, the 4th and 5th grade campus. And so I'll talk a little bit about that here in a little bit. Some of the things that I needed was a program for math that assessed individual needs, target those needs, and teaches at grade level and beyond. Not only did I need it to bring a kid up, but I wanted it to teach at grade level. Some of the things that were very, very important to me were the instructional components within that math program, and again, that they had reports that would support any data-driven decisions that we needed to make for a student or a class or what have you. So I called a friend of mine. Well, the assistant superintendent at the time, she knew somebody who worked for us in math, and so I gave her a call, and she spent about 4 hours with me in my office, which is if you've ever been a principal, you'll understand 4 hours with you in the office is probably quite a feat, because you usually don't have that much time to spend with somebody. We chose Ascend Math, and she showed me the program. I asked 100 questions. I even had her working through lunch, so we had to like. I knew we were not going to make it. And this was in November of my first year being the principal there. But we ended up changing our tutorial schedule dramatically. And what it basically meant was the teacher tutorials were a little bit smaller. And what we addressed, what we call mandatory tutorials, okay? And what that meant was if a kid failed a class, a math class, they were in a computer lab for 1 hour a week working on Ascend Math, and then they went to their teacher for 30 minutes a week. And if they needed a little bit more time, if they failed a little bit more, or they weren't progressing, we would probably give them 2 computer lab times with Ascend Math. And what was happening is each week, each 6 weeks, we would call parents. Between the counselors and myself, we would split up the kids and call the parents and give them a letter with their tutorial schedule that said, you know, your kid has tutorials on Monday and Tuesday till 5. They have it with their teacher on Thursday afternoon till 4:20, 4:30. But we always ended that, you know, when we talked to the parents, we'd always say, you know, we're trying to help your child do well and excel in math, and we just need your help. And basically what we tell them at that point is we needed your help by making sure they were at school and that they were going to stay till 5 o'clock. When you say it like that, it really takes everything off of the parents' hands, except for the fact they got to get somebody there to pick up the kid. Every day that we were in there, we had about 50 to 60 students in the math labs with 1 to 4 adults, and we use index cards just to kind of help, because you know the dynamics of a classroom setting, just where the kids seat in that class, or where they sit in that class, is can make or break a classroom just by making them sit a certain way. I found out what worked best for me in that group, just because a lot of those students are very distractible, is I would do, you know, boy-girl order, and after a while they got used to it. They didn't even ask me. They just knew we had to sit in boy-girl order, and we sat there and they got a lot of work done. And so we just did things like that, and the index cards just kind of helped me to place the kids in their room. And I mentioned that because that was a very important part in getting the kids to work in there. The adults that were in there were myself, an assistant principal, usually an aide. Rarely there was a math teacher in there, because I had the math teachers doing, you know, on grade level tutorials. And so we did those tutorials from Monday through Thursday, no Fridays, from 3:50 to 5 o'clock. And then later on, we added Saturday school for kids that needed attendance credit. And so we ended up having students use Ascend Math in there as well. We used a home calling system, which is very unique. A lot of school districts have them where it's a system that it's computer-based, web-based, where it'll call parents of a school and give them messages like, if today's a bad weather day, or whatever it is, there's a game tonight, or we just mailed out report cards. I used the home calling system to call parents the night before to say, your kid has tutorials tomorrow till 5, make sure they're there, you can pick them at 5, and then they get another phone call throughout the day around 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon that day, says, reminder, your kid has tutorials today till 5 in the computer lab. If they can't make it or something comes up, please call the school and let us know. And I was a little apprehensive, because I thought, you know, that's going to be too many calls, the parents are going to get mad. And not really. I mean, I had parents that would call and say, you know, I didn't get a phone call today, but I don't know if my kid has tutorials. I said, well, if you didn't get a phone call, then you're probably right. You know, your kid doesn't have tutorials, you know. And so they actually liked them. I had only one incident where there was parents getting a divorce, and one of them didn't want the other parent to know, and so I said, well, I'm sorry, we'll just let both parents know, and that's just the way it is. The biggest challenge that we had was incorrect numbers. We had a lot of kids that their parents would change their numbers and stuff, and so luckily the system that we used will tell me if it's a blocked call, if it's a phone number that doesn't work anymore. It'll tell me anything I want to know about that kid, their phone calls. And then I later expanded that calling system for Saturday schools and test days and things like that. Um, some of the issues that we needed to address the second year, okay, because the first year we just basically did a send math after school and before school. The second year, what I wanted to do was I wanted to address the math gaps sooner, because we knew we had information and data from testing to know which kids were struggling in math. So I wanted to develop a plan that addressed the students' need in math, and I needed to come up with the logistics. So I needed to address the time they were going to do it, the personnel, and again, get the biggest bang for our buck. As much money as we were going to spend, and that we utilize it. So the math teachers were sold on it, and so what I ended up doing the second year at Fort Stockton Middle School was I scheduled students during the school day. We went from an 8-period day to a 9-period day, and we sold it on the fact of we were allowing teachers to have fewer kids in their class, and it allowed me to make an extra class, which is this class, the what I call the Ascend Math class, and it was 47-minute periods, and we started class at 8 o'clock to 3:45, and we had 3 hours. The kids were in there every day. We had 8 periods a day because I had to give the lady a lunch period, and it was an aide, a pretty receptive aide, paraprofessional that could help us out in that room. And what the kids had to do was they had to get on that Ascend Math program for 42 minutes a day, which was about 210 minutes a week, which came out to 3 hours and 30 minutes. And so I kind of gave them, we had 47 minutes, but I gave them 5 minutes because I thought, well, they may kind of space out a little bit and what have you. So nevertheless, they were in there working on that program. Well, the other thing that came into play was I needed a classroom, and I needed a mini computer lab that had about 20 to 25 computers in there. I had to address the electricity, I had to address the internet, and all of this was done in the summer. I did have to move a teacher's aide in there, and like I said, we went from a 9-period day with 8 class periods, 20 computers, 1 lab printer, and that allowed me to possibly put about 160 kids in there a day. And that was their schedule. Like if they had second period Ascend Math class, they went to that class every day within the school day. Plus, they went to their math class. So the whole idea was that their math teacher had to teach at grade level, and that the Ascend Math program with the instructional components and the testing and the remediation that it would do would slowly bring those kids' math gaps. We would basically close the gaps of where the kid was at, bringing them up to grade level, and then teaching at grade level. And so that was we just talked about that with math teachers, and like I said, I kept telling teachers, you have to teach at grade level. If you don't, our kids are not going to know. They're going to do worse on that test. And let the Ascend Math program bring those kids up. And as ironically as it may sound, the teachers could tell which kids were in there. I would have weekly student meetings, and I still have those weekly student meetings now, where I go in the room and I tell the kids, I run a report. That's the amount of time that kid worked on that report, and it tells me what level they were on, and then if they also completed any levels. And if they completed a level, in other words, a level is, let's just say a kid tested out on Ascend Math and he's, on level 4th grade level. Well, 2 weeks later he's on 5th grade level. Well, I would reward him. And I would do 2 kinds of rewards at middle school. At high school, I had to do something a little bit different, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. But if you got your 3 hours and 30 minutes, we just gave you a little candy, And then if you went to a level completion, Stripes here in Texas is a convenience store, and they have a website where you can get these Smart Monkey slush coupons. And I would write under the student's name, the date, and I would sign it, and I'd give it to them. And anytime they went up 1 level, they'd get that Smart Monkey, free small slush monkey coupon. And they'd go Stripes, and they think they were the greatest thing in the world. Unfortunately, high school kids are not really too, fond of Smart Monkey free slushes. So what I ended up doing was giving them a free homework pass for any teacher. And that's like gold. I mean, I did not realize how important it is for kids not to do that, but not to do their homework. But nevertheless, So if they went up one level, they get a free homework pass. They could use it in any class whatsoever, but it was only on homework. It wasn't a major test grade. It wasn't a project. It was on a daily homework assignment. And as crazy as that sounds, those kids loved them. So we use that here at the high school. And sometimes I give the kids an opportunity to get that smart monkey, and sometimes I'll take them. But I'm telling you, those free homework passes are like gold down here in Fort Stockton. So um, now I want to go into the data real quick. The first year that we did this, if you notice, we had 120 kids who failed math, 12 kids that were in special education, 49 who had to do attendance recovery, DAP, and then back when we had TAKS, we don't have TAKS anymore in Texas. We have what's called the STAR exam or the end of course exam. We had 46 kids who did not pass TAKS. Now, some of these kids are all, like we may have a kid is in 8th grade TAKS who is at DAP that needs to do attendance recovery, that may be a special ed student that may have failed their class in math. So some of these kids are all in different, they may be in one or two groups, okay? But these are the interventions that we had the first year we did Ascend Math in 2010, 2011. Now, you need to understand something. We didn't start this till January of 2011. We didn't start at the beginning of the school year just because I wanted to give the teachers an opportunity to continue with what they were doing, and obviously it wasn't working. We had after-school tutorials for the math students who failed math from about 1 or 2 hours a week. What I wanted to show here is this part down here. With 120 kids, our goal was to have 50% of those kids pass the math TAKS test. Well, we ended up with 55%. The special education class, the resource class, these kids would get on and send math for 3 hours a week. Our goal was to have 75% of them. We had 86% pass. Attendance recovery, those kids that don't come to school, they were actually doing Saturday school 4 hours a week working on Send Math, and our goal was to do 60%. Well, we ended up having 71%, and it goes down the line. DAP, DAP students have a lot of issues. Here in Fort Stockton, we only send kids to DAP if it's mandatory placement because of state law. We don't put kids in there just because they're giving us a hard time. They really have to commit a crime that forces us to have to do that. And then as far as 8th grade TAKS, we had 25%. That was our goal for 25%. We had about 48% of them pass the 8th grade TAKS test. And they were actually in it 6 to 9 hours a week. Here is another chart that we used that first year. This just shows the post-assessment opposed to the pre-assessment. And we had students testing out at level 3. And you can see here the gains that they had. The other thing that's very important, that in Ascend Math, I set the passing standard as 80%, so that when the kids had to take the test, they had to make at least an 80 to go on to the next level. I felt that 70 was just getting lucky, and I know that sounds kind of horrible, but unfortunately, the way the program is designed, it reteaches those students through the instructional components that so that they can be successful at a higher level. If you notice down here, we had a lot of students at level 8, which is 8th grade level, and they tested out at 40% passing, but all of them are going to be over the 80% mark, and that's kind of crazy because I set the bar at 80%, but if you notice, they're over that. There's some even to the 90%. So I think our philosophy was if you set the bar high enough, they'll reach it. It's just a matter of blood, sweat, and some tears, I guess, at that point. Now, this was our second year, okay? The one thing I would like to note that in our second year, we had less kids failing math. We do have a lot of ESL students, and those are the English second language since we're so close to Mexico. We had students that failed math. The math study hall class, this was anybody who I felt needed to do better at passing. Well, actually, these students never passed their TAKS test the year before. And so if they didn't pass their TAKS test, we had 112 kids in the study hall classes throughout the day. So they met and they had to do work at least 3.5 hours a week. They had 0% passing rate. That's why they're in that class. Well, it was all said and done, 70% of those kids passed their class. In the ESL students, they met during the school day in their ESL class. 41% of them passed the year before. 60% actually ended up passing at the end of the year. The students that failed math, we had about 42 kids. We started out with 42 the year before, and so now, no, we had 120 the year before, and then we had 42 that year. And so we had 28% pass the year before, and at the end of the year we had 60%, and it went all the way down as far as the different interventions that we used the second year. This number was that we didn't have any kids in the study hall class the year before because it didn't exist. I ended up putting 112 in there. 0% of those kids passed the year before. The next year they made 70% passing in 2012. This is just another report, very similar to that other one, where as you can see, we had students working at level 2 the second year, and they increased up to past 80%. In fact, what a lot of kids were doing is they were even going beyond and getting instruction at level 9 and level 10. That's 9th and 10th grade level of math here in high school, which is basically Algebra 1. And so we did that, and a lot of those kids, I left them on there, said, no, they need to be taught at a higher level. So I just wanted to show you this. Last year, Fort Stockton Middle School met AYP, and we made it based upon an improvement model. We didn't make AYP the year before, and we were acceptable this year as well. But I want to show you some things. In 2010-2011, we had all students, 77% students passing math. Well, last year, in school year ending 2012, we had 86% of the kids passing math. And that was based off the AYP tax bridge study of how we calculated in Texas if you meant AYP or not. If you notice, we had gains in all of the subgroups, especially the special ed subgroup, which is very, very good. Our white students, we had 97% the year before. Last year we had 95%. It went down, but that's understandable. But when you look at the plus 10%, the plus 9%, plus 22%, and Fort Stockton Middle School made AYP, our district made AYP, and a lot of that had to do with these students who were doing well in math, because the middle school had 3 grade levels tested in math that pertained to the district's AYP rating. High school had 1 grade level, the intermediate school had 2 grade levels, and the elementary schools only had 1 grade level. So it's very important for the middle school to do well for AYP standards. Real quick, the STAR release information. This was information released later on. After the AYP bridge study, it shows that the state average for math is 77, 71, 76. If you notice here, we struggle. For some reason, 6th grade always struggles, and we're working on that. But as you can see, we're above the state average in 8th grade math and 7th grade math. And in fact, I got some news earlier or later last week that the 8th grade test information came back from the middle school principal, and she told me they had 88% of their kids meet the level 2 standard of passing the STAR test in 8th grade. So that's new information. In fact, that's well above the state average, and so I just wanted to throw that in there. Of course, for Algebra 1, we had kids at the high school. Their passing rate was 83, which is at the state rate as well. And the reason why I mentioned that is because they had a lot of kids teaching, or a lot of kids doing Ascend Math at the high school. This is another chart basically that other chart that has the bars, but it just shows the amount of gains over here on the right hand side from where the kid worked, where their first scores were at, to where they are now. So you can see the percent gain is huge in a lot of areas, and if you notice right here, it's set at 80%, but a lot of the averages are above 80%, which is a good thing. I think that if it wasn't there, I'd be seeing numbers that are less, 10% less from where they are now. This is just the average task on time of a student working on the program. Here's another graphic for showing our results in the program, and these reports you can get from Ascend Math. They do a great job of showing you where you're at. It's basically the same thing. Now this report is from this school year at Fort Stockton High School. It shows that we had some kids tested at 4th grade level, 5th grade level, but you can see that they've gained tremendous amounts of gains within the program. And even though I have it set at 80%, all of these numbers are well above 80%. Now, here's some other Fort Stockton High School data that we did this year. We had students who still had to take tax, and that's the juniors and seniors. We had EOC Algebra 1, which was basically the freshman. Now, we had 7 out of 16 students who did not pass the tax test, and we had them on Ascend Math. Well, actually, we had 16 students who did not pass the tax math. I put them on Ascend Math, and 7 of them ended up passing for the first time ever. Same thing with the EOC in Algebra 1. We had 13 students who didn't pass, and we ended up putting all those kids on Ascend Math, and 3 of them ended up passing. And that's just kind of, this right here is the total of these 2 right here. So, and at high school, we actually do have an Ascend Math class. I call it a support lab now, because some of the kids, when I explain to parents, it's the Ascend support class, and so they kind of, it's just the way you say things that makes people rethink things over, because they'll think of it as a punishment, but in reality we're trying to help them. So some of the things that we did this year, they're proactive, they're a little bit different than we've done in the past, is we did tutorials before and after school. We still do Saturday and night school here at the high school. We do the support lab as opposed to Ascend lab, because for some reason kids didn't like it, but when you change the name of saying the support Ascend lab or the Ascend support lab, it's different, and I don't know what it is. I guess it's this whole connotation of I don't want to be in middle school. I think it's what it basically is. Oh, Ascend Math Lab, that's in middle school, and I think they want to feel they're in high school. So I just did that. It's no big deal. The other thing is that I support students in other subjects, not including math, but it can be ELA, science, what have you. And so I also still support the kids in special populations with the ESL students, the special ed students, and so we're being proactive on that. Now I want to show you this slide. This slide is very, very cool, and I hate to show this slide to people, especially the Ascend Math people, but my last year at Fort Stockton Middle School, last year, for the beginning of the school year to the end of the summer school, our students had 10,727 hours working on Ascend Math. I mean, that is a lot of time, and I almost didn't want to share that with people, because I was like, good Lord, we're using, we're going to end up paying them more money, but they're cool about it. They know. And then this year, from the beginning of the semester till January, our students in high school used it 4,182 hours to help them in math. And so that's a high volume worth of math instruction outside of their math class already. It's basically a specific tutor for each kid on the Ascend Math program that just targets their needs and nobody else's. The other thing that I wanted to mention, some of the important things are the structured implementation. We have the kids going to the support Ascend class. I do periodic progress checks where I go in there weekly, tell them how they're doing, tell them if they need to if they don't do their time, the 3 hours and 30 minutes, they have to do time for me on Saturday school or Tuesday and Thursday night school. Well, when you say it like that, they'll get their time in because they don't want to come in and do that. The other thing is being very positive when they do well, and you reward their successes. In conclusion, I just want to say some of the things that I'm very thankful for that in using the Ascend Math program is that we have the Ascend Math class going out during the school day. We have tutorials as needed. We have less need, and teachers are using the flashcard math. Flashcard math is free, and I'm going to tell you another little story on that here in a little bit. The teachers are thankful, the students are excited to do math, and the parents are thankful. At the beginning of the year at the high school and at the middle school, we had all the kids in our Ascend support classes do the flashcard math, and it's basically your multiplication tables. And I said it where they had to get, for example, they had to do the multiplication tables of like 1s and 2s. They had to do 40 in 4 minutes and get 100% right. And you would be amazed how long it took some of those kids to do it. And so, but we did it at the middle school, we did it at the high school, and that was one of the things I think helped out all our students, is that because some of them didn't know their multiplication facts, and I did not like watching kids with their fingers out counting, trying to figure out, what was 8 times 8 or 7 times 4. It is driving me crazy. So nevertheless, before we did anything, they had to finish the flashcard math. I wouldn't say in games, but nevertheless, some of the kids thought they were games. But the flashcard math exercises before they did anything else. Um, the other thing is I want to say Shorty Thomas, she's the representative that comes to Fort Stockton. She's always a call away. She calls me, she emails me, I call her, we talk about things. She'll show up if she's driving through town, and then if I have any questions, she'll clarify some things. A lot of times her and I just talk about what other schools are doing and what other schools are being successful at, and so I learn from her. She's a I like the fact that we have personal one-on-one experience, and I consider her part of our team, part of our school. And so I'm very fortunate to be able to work with people at Ascend Math who are like that. The other thing is the Ascend Math people, I'm very thankful for them. I will say this, when I call them, they're very helpful. Reports. There were some reports that I wanted Ascend Math to give me, and at the time when I started 2 years ago or 3 years ago, it didn't do it to the way I wanted. Well, I'll be darned. I would call them and I'd tell them I need a report that can do this and this and this, and a few weeks later, bingo, there it was. And so they're always open to listening to what you need and getting you the reports you need. And so I do really like that and appreciate that. We've even Skyped before so we can share screens. We've talked about instructional aspects and flashcard math. And I honestly have to say that the best people I've had to work with when it comes to an instructional-based program to help our students. In conclusion, I just want to thank my superintendents and our technology director and the math department, and of course Shorty Thomas at Ascend Math and Marjorie and Kevin Briley.